Welcome back to FP Executive. I'm here with Dan Fortin, the president of IBM Canada. Thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure, John.
We were mentioning transportation and smart cities. People are talking about how do you get around a city? How do you, for example, deal with global warming? We don't want cities with congestion. You've thought a bit about this. You've seen cities throughout Latin America with populations of 20 million, 17 million. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, you're referring to major cities in South America, around the world, where we've seen what happens. We've seen when traffic just overruns a city and there's gridlock, and it impacts the city, it impacts the business, it impacts every aspect of it. And you think, okay, well, where are we in Canada, and how do we avoid that as we continue to grow? You know, the statistics say that 70% of the world's population is going to be living in cities within 2050. Right. So there's a tremendous urban growth. How do we alleviate some of those things and, in fact, allow our cities to be prosperous? Now, there are experts on transportation. I don't mean to be that. But think of simple things. Think of smart traffic, John.
Okay.
So why wouldn't you and I think of it as car insurance or some sort, based on how we use our city's transportation? So if you have a car and you drive, if you drive, right in the rush hours, if you're going downtown and so on, why wouldn't that be a premium versus somebody who's going to drive to the north of the city or off hours?
Is this sort of like what they do in London, England, where you have different times and you pay various amounts in order to drive at that time?
Exactly, and there's a number of cities that are emerging that way, Stockholm, London, a number of others, and I know our Canadian cities are looking at that as well. Just the notion of distributing traffic and just trying to be smarter about it.
Right.
Tremendous opportunity for us.
Now, you mentioned that Canadian CEOs stand out in areas of corporate social responsibility and conservation. I'd like to dig into that a little bit more. Can you tell me about that conservation attitude that you've seen amongst Canadian CEOs?
Yeah. So in our study where we surveyed CEOs around the world, I don't mean to say that other countries and other CEOs were not conscious of energy and corporate social responsibility, but clearly in Canada, CEOs said, almost 80% of all CEOs said that this would be a top agenda item for them on how they're going to innovate their company, how they're going to differentiate themselves. And they're responding to their clients' needs. And it's fascinating to see. The other differentiator for us, I think, as Canadians, and what these CEOs of ours have said, is they take it on as a challenge. They're excited about it. It's not a threat to their business.
Okay.
Others have felt as if it's something that's going to come along almost as a tax or a burden. Or our guys, our CEOs, our guys and gals are saying, you know what, this is how we're going to differentiate our company. And they're taking it on as a challenge. And they have energy behind it, and we're seeing a lot of the results across the country.
Again, I find it very interesting that you have traveled around the world in places, Latin America, obviously through the United States. How are you received as a Canadian? I'm always interested in that. How people outside of Canada perceive us, because I've talked to many business people, and some of them say, we really don't promote Canada as well as we should. It is a great brand. I'm curious what you've encountered.
Well, it is a fantastic brand. I'm glad you said it that way. I think we are so respected around the world. And I'm not a politician. I don't travel in those circles. But I would tell you, in business circles, when people understand I'm Canadian, there's a certain understanding. Perhaps we're not outspoken. Perhaps we're not going to be boisterous, but we're going to speak with our actions.
Okay.
And when we say something, we commit to something. I think as Canadians, we have this fierce pride inside of us that we're going to deliver on what we say.
Right.
And I think that is a cultural element that we don't often celebrate.
Interesting.
We're incredibly trustworthy to come through. And in business, whether you're a client, whether you're a supplier, whether you're a collaborator, that sense of trust and responsibility and accountability to each other goes a long way.
Well, it sounds that's exactly what, if we're moving towards it, we have been a globalized economy. Trust is the first ingredient of a good business relationship. So
it absolutely
sounds
is.
like we have a good future if we continue along this path.
Yeah, we do. But the counter to that is we also need to engage.
Okay.
We also need to engage. And so we need to be able to take on those challenges and those global markets and that collaboration with other, whether it be co-opetition, people who sometimes are your competition that you need to collaborate with, either with your clients or your suppliers. And you need to engage in that sense of collaboration to take on a global market.
Well, this is interesting. Do you have an example that you've seen where that works really well?
Well, I think there are examples around the world going on every day. I think of some local examples. I think of SciNet here in Toronto, based out of the University of Toronto, the largest supercomputer in the world, doing all sorts of research work, whether it be around weather, around cancer research. It's just sort of a hub for massive research. And that came from collaboration. That came from private researchers, from our public institutions, from our private enterprises. We all come together, and here we are as supercomputer giants here in Canada.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Dan Fortin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, John. It's my pleasure.